You do realise this is overdue, don't you?
Yes, but
60 years out of date.
there'll be a fine to pay, you know.
What's it about? You mean you haven't even read it?
But it's a classic.
Yes, I am aware that it is also one of the set books of the Prydonian Academy.
And you have an essay to write.
And you haven't even read it. You tiny teens.
What with your mobile comm links and Tim Talk videos?
No, I don't think they've made a hollow video of it. Father Time. Perhaps it's one of the Doctor's greatest adventures.
Well, of course I've read it. Like I said, it's a classic.
It's been a while. Do you know, I might have a reread of it later. If you come back later on, I might even read it to you.
Now, off you go. I've got work to do.
The worshipful and ancient lore. Oh, no. No, that shouldn't be out. No. There you are. Well, come on in. Sit down. Tea? It's an earth beverage, you know. Milk? 1 lump or 2? Sugar? Yes, of course, the book. Father Time. Yes. Now, are you sitting comfortably? Then I shall begin. Father Time, Part 1. As time begins. The sky burnt a deep orange and blazed through the dark, heavy cloud covering. Tendrils of smoke still rose from the devastation that stretched out over the floor of the valley. The carpet of red grass, which has littered the ground, had long gone, and all that was left of the field were patches of charred remains. The mountains of solace and solitude stood in silence, staring down in quiet disapproval and sadness at the once proud monument that had been the hub of Time Lord power for centuries. In the middle of the valley sat the smoking embers of the Capitol, the ancestral seat of the Time Lords. The once mighty curved appendages, which had held in place the glass-like dome, stood cracked and broken as they curved, clawing at the sky. The buildings throughout the capital lay shattered and broken in the ruins of the destruction. The TARDIS sat quietly on an outcrop of rock, waiting as the odd pieces of debris fell from the once magnificent towers and crashed into the ashes, throwing up clouds like a grime-filled phoenix in the failing light. The door was open, and light from the interior cast a corridor to a slight wooden deck chair. The Doctor sat in the striped material and lamented the loss of her world. She closed her eyes and smiled, as thoughts of a distant life struggled to surface in her mind, then faded, as the acrid smell caressed her senses.
How had this happened?
She had fought so hard to save Gallifrey from the Daleks during the Time War. She had carried so much guilt for so many years. It had weighed heavily on her hearts. Then it had come back, and once again she had struggled with her guilt as her own people rose against her. Time and time again her guilt had threatened to consume her. But she couldn't let go, could she? After all, this was her home, her life. This was Gallifrey.
I know you're there,
she called over her shoulder.
You may as well show yourself.
She never moved from her deck chair or looked around at the shadow as it peeled itself from the side of the TARDIS.
You are not welcome here,
she said defiantly, as the figure moved almost silently over the ground to where she sat.
Ood Sigma.
The figure stopped a few feet away from the Doctor and gazed at her.
Why are you here? She demanded. To offer your respects for my dead race, or gloat that I couldn't save them, just like so many of your kind.
Her words were unfair, and she knew it. But her hearts were filled with grief, and her sorrow made her angry. Forgive my intrusion. The Ood stood dressed in a simple black uniform and held the translation sphere in his hand. The light from it, as he spoke, cast a shadow over its face, and it lowered its head in respect. I mean no disrespect. It's not your fault, she said, as she finally looked over her shoulder. It's me you should be apologising. She waved him forward and covered her eyes as he stood before the light of the sun blazing over his shoulder. Just why are you here? She asked again. After all, it's been so long since I last saw you. Your regeneration, agreed Ood Sigma. You sang to me. She smiled as she looked up at him from her chair. Like I said, so long ago. She smiled. How are you here? The transduction barriers around the planet are no longer operational since the fall of Gallifrey, he said simply in a soft voice. The Doctor pushed herself out of her chair and rounded on Ood Sigma and pointed a finger at his chest. You know that's not what I meant, she snapped, as she turned away and paced. Why are you here now? I mean, at this point, there's no logic in it, is there? She stopped and looked at Ood Sigma. Or is there? She ran her hand through her blonde hair as she started pacing once again. What if you know what happened here and you've come to give me a message? She shook her head. But then, if that were true, then you'd know who did this, and they'd know I know you know, and I'd work it all out. And she stopped and stepped up to Ood Sigma. You don't know, do you? I was brought here to sing to you, said Ood Sigma simply. He blinked in the sunlight as she stared at him and smiled suddenly. Sing to me, she queried, as she walked back to her chair and placed a hand on the back of it and stared over the twisted remains of the Capitol. What kind of song? A song of trust, Doctor. Trust? That is correct. The Ood stood in the sunlight as the Doctor lowered herself back into her chair and closed her eyes as the soothing choir echoed in her head. Who would want to send you to me, Ood Sigma? She asked as she sat with her back to the Ood. And why this song? She leant forward and craned her neck back at the Ood. This doesn't make sense. There is something coming, Doctor, warned the Ood. Something which will change your life. Your lives. This interested the Doctor, and once again she pushed herself out of her chair. Is this a threat? She demanded. Ood Sigma regarded her and tilted his head as he pressed the small button on the translator sphere. Not a threat, Doctor, but a warning. From whom? This I cannot say. Cannot or will not? Both. This warning. She walked towards him and circled the Ood as she spoke. Is it from the person who did this? She waved across the burning landscape. The Ood said nothing. Predictable, she remarked as she kicked on the dust on the ground. Trust, she said as she peered closely at the Ood. What do you mean? My song is one of trust, Doctor. You said that already, she replied. But what does it mean? Trust? You must learn to trust in yourself and put your own needs before the needs of others. What does that mean? She stopped pacing and threw her hands out before her. What if? No, it could be. No, wait, hang on. I'm getting a thought. Oh, well done, Doctor. What you mean? No, that's not right. But if you're here, I mean, right now, right at this point, at the fall of Gallifrey, then perhaps what's happened isn't what could have. Could it? She turned to face Ood Sigma, frustrated at her failed logic. A cloud of vapour was circling her feet and slowly enveloping her legs. Ood Sigma! She shouted. I need to know. What does this mean? You will need to find yourself, said his soft voice, as he began to disappear in a cloud of smoke as the thick vortex rose over his body. Ood Sigma! She shouted, as the cloud covered the creature's entire body, leaving only a glowing light from its sphere. What does it mean? Look to yourself. The light faded, as did the voice, leaving the Doctor alone with her thoughts. She stepped forward to the spot Ood Sigma had been standing and gazed down at the burnt circle on the floor by the TARDIS and shook her head. Look to yourself, she whispered as she turned her head towards the capital. Yourself. A slight drizzle had soaked the stone-drenched hillside, and from over the brow of the hill walked a lone traveller. His long blue cloak hid most of his body, and behind his head a large, wide collar obscured his face. His feet crunched in the loose shingle as he stepped onto the plateau and surveyed the devastation around him. Silver bodies lay in pieces across the whole area. Arms, legs, chest plates, and almost unrecognisable heads of Cybermen littered the stony ground. The traveller knelt by the torn remnants of a Cyberman and allowed his hand to stroke the facepiece of the silver giant. Such a waste, he whispered as he lifted the head by its handle and moved his coat aside to reveal a plain combat suit. He removed a length of cord and tied the head to his waist before allowing his cloak to fall over the broken cyber head. He straightened and gazed into the sky, allowing the light rain to caress his face for the briefest of moments before walking slowly to a small cave set into the hillside. He paused at the entrance, glancing down at the decaying figure at his feet, and for the second time in as many minutes, he knelt by the crumbling body. This was different from the Cyberman. It showed no signs of damage on its perfectly smooth body or head. The traveller moved his hands along the smooth precision lines of the figure before running a palm over its smooth plain head. The Raston warrior robot. He breathed softly, as though his very words might bring the creature to life. The finest creation of the weapon world of Zampa. He placed his hands either side of the robot's head and pulled it gently away from its body. The perfect killing machine. He spoke to himself, in awe of the robot, and stood with the head balanced in the palm of his hand. So graceful and elegant, but deadly. You could have killed thousands. He looked around at the littered bodies of the Cybermen strewn across the plateau, and evidently you did. His voice could almost taste the stench of death as he brought the head to his eye line. And yet here you are, destroyed at the hands of time itself. Nothing but a decaying corpse, your power levels long since exhausted. Was this your last battle, I wonder? He tipped the head from his hand and watched it roll across the uneven floor. He walked solemnly to its resting place and stared down at the head of the Raston robot before stamping his heavy boot through its faceplate. Alas, nothing lasts forever, my friend, he lamented as the pieces crunched under his foot. He turned his head and stared at the dominating presence of the tower behind him, and with a backpack slung over his shoulder and the prize around his waist, he moved past the cave and along the winding path which led down towards the entrance of the dark tower and the tomb of Rassilon. The room was large and devoid of any feature, except for a small ornate monument, the stone sarcophagus, which stood proud in the centre of the room. The traveller stood and took a deep breath in the doorway before stepping over the threshold and walked to the monument. The hand trailed over the ancient text as his fingers played across the spiralling hieroglyphics as he paused and gazed at the stone. To lose is to win, and he who wins shall lose. He quoted as he walked around the plinth that the stone shrine sat upon. Imbecile! He rounded angrily on the tomb and strode across the floor. Hear me! He called through the dark atmosphere. I call upon the ancients of this world to answer my demands. A shadowy head shimmered into view over the sarcophagus and gazed down at the traveller, smiling. This is the game of Rassilon, boomed the voice. You can dispense with the theatrics, snapped the traveller. I know who you are and what you offer. He pointed a finger accusingly at the holographic head. Then you know this is the game of Rassilon, and what the prize is? I do. The reply was cold, and the traveller stood holding his ground as the face glimmered in the dullness of the tomb. You do not fear me? Asked Rassilon. Why should I fear you? Your power is long since gone. You now rot on a dying world with only ghosts as company. The traveller walked around the stone tomb as he spoke. Any legend of your divinity died with the war. You are nothing, old man! He slammed a fist down onto the stonework and grinned as Part of it fell away under his hand. "Your empire is crumbling." "Then why have you come here?" "I seek what is rightfully mine." "Immortality," smiled Rassilon. The trap was set. The traveller laughed at the suggestion and let the cloak covering his body fall to the ground, revealing a cybernetic body. "I have no need for such frivolity. I seek something far greater." Rassilon gazed down on the partially cybernetic body, and a frown passed across his holographic brow. "I see you have no need for my gift. Then what do you seek, stranger?" "Ha! Stranger!" laughed the traveller. "Do you not recognize me, old man?" He laughed as he continued to circle the tomb. "Look harder and pierce my mind." "Your mind is hidden to me," admitted Rassilon, as he watched the traveller circle like a vulture around his resting place. "I find that as intriguing as your presence. The coronet allows me access to thoughts of every creature. Why should you be any different?" The traveller laughed and turned his back on the hologram head, and slowly turned towards him. "Who disturbs the sleep of Rassilon? And why have you come?" "You still do not recognize me?" scoffed the traveller, as he threw his arms out wide. "I was power incarnate. I had everything at my fingers. Power, infinite power. All of time and space at my command, and then it was taken from me by an upstart. I allow you access to my mind." He turned and grinned at the face before him and threw his head back. "This is not possible," breathed Rassilon. "You should not be here." "But I am. This digresses the very law of Gallifrey." "What are the laws of Gallifrey to me? I created the laws of time, and I can smash the glass ceiling of the Panopticon at a will." He rounded on the tomb and leant his cybernetic hands on the edge of the sarcophagus and spoke softly to the hologram. "I am Rassilon, father of Gallifrey, and I seek what is rightfully mine, which is, give me Barusa." The cold, dead eyes of the cyber head stared out across the tomb as it sat lamenting its own death. The figure of Rassilon crouched before it, placing a series of wires against various points of its head, and gingerly touching the cybernetic graft on the side of his own face. He closed his eyes and gingerly laid the palm of his hand on the top of the head and listened to the insistent whisper in his mind. "I hear you," he whispered quietly. "I hear your voice in my head, that incessant whisper, urging me, pulling me forward." He opened his eyes and glanced at Barusa as he worked at the other end of the tomb. "I am not your servant, but you shall be mine, as will your entire race." He ran wiring from the head to a small square monitor and connected the device.
I will not, shall not yield to your will, Cyberplanner,
he said defiantly, as he operated set small switches on the device and watched as power built through the monitor and through the cyber head.
Hear me, Planner. Listen to the will of Rassilon.
A voice replied from the head in the distinctive tones of a Cyberman.
Your designation is not leader,
it said. But you shall acknowledge me as such, replied Rassilon, as he stood and stared down at the broken head of the Cyberman.
Cybermen do not make deals with lesser creatures,
came the cold voice.
How dare you?
snapped Rassilon.
I am no mere mortal. I am Rassilon, father of the Time Lords and ruler supreme of Gallifrey. I hold the key to immortality in my hands, and I am your superior. You will yield to my will.
The cyber race are superior.
The cyber race are gone,
interrupted Rassilon. Your numbers are depleted, your world destroyed. You are nothing but dust in the wind of time. Rassilon paused, as if to allow his words to access the Cyberman's mind before continuing. I am your salvation.
You lie,
said the Cyberman simply.
I have accessed all relevant information required from Cyber Command through neural networks, and our position is unchanged. It is you who is weak.
Rassilon could imagine the Cyberman smirking as it came to its conclusion.
You came to us to be upgraded because of our dominance, and now you seek our assistance again.
I seek only to have you leave my mind,
raged Rassilon as he turned away.
The knowledge I possess is mine and mine alone. It does not belong to the cyber race.
Your unity with our species cannot be severed. You are one of us.
Never!
Rassilon brought his hand down onto the stone tomb.
I am power, and you shall bend to my will.
You need something from us. That is why you have reactivated this unit.
The statement was emotionless and to the point.
I can see from the core memory banks that this unit was destroyed on Gallifrey many years ago.
Rassilon turned slowly. Can I assume I am talking to the Cyberplanner?
Speak.
The voice had not changed in tone, but instead in authority.
I allow you audience for a short time.
You know my plan? Asked Rassilon. I could feel you in my head, scanning my thoughts and memories.
The cyber race does know of your plan, and it shall not succeed.
Reason?
Logic dictates this place will be discovered as soon as the power build-up of your equipment is turned on. A new location is necessary for complete success.
And then I shall succeed?
No.
The reply was simple.
The equipment is unstable and needs an upgrade.
Logic is my toy,
yelled Rassilon. But you're right. His voice trailed off as he mused. I would be discovered. I need to move this operation to a more secure base.
We shall prepare an invasion force,
came the voice from the cyberhead.
You shall prepare nothing. I still have my supporters,
snapped Rassilon. He closed his eyes and threw his arms high in the air as his voice rose. "Friends and allies within the depths of the Panopticon, we shall move against the High Council once I have sought my revenge." He grasped the wires in his hands and pulled them from the Cyberman's head. "I have all I need now, and you shall leave me." "My lord?" queried a voice from behind him, which caused Rassilon to open his eyes and stand, looking down on the remnants of the Cyberman. "Continue your work," ordered Rassilon, not turning, but instead staring in cold defiance at the cyber head. "Is all well?" "I said continue!" roared Rassilon, spinning around and confronting the Time Lord. He paused and looked at the tall, gaunt individual bathed in light over his dark robes. "Forgive me, my lord Barusa, but the work is vital to me." Barusa bowed his head and returned to his work at a large console which had been installed in the corner of the tomb. "My infliction is only minor, and one I intend to rectify in time." He waved at the intricate series of wiring which adorned the side of his face. He walked across the tomb, ignoring his own sarcophagus as he joined Barusa. "The cybernetic connection with the Cyberian still talks to me through this." He touched the side of his face. "Like a whisper in the breeze. It speaks of upgrading fully to the cyber species and of conquest." He placed a hand on Barusa's shoulder and smiled. "I have no need of them." "Your body?" Barusa tried to avoid looking at the unmistakable partial body of a Cyberman beneath the robes of a Time Lord. "Simply a means to an end," dismissed Rassilon. "Nothing more." He peered at the equipment and indicated the screens. "I must admit, my lord, I am surprised you understand this technology." "I had in my possession the Black Scrolls," said Barusa, turning in his seat and staring at Rassilon. "They told me all about this equipment." He waved a hand over the keyboard on the control panel. "They told me all about the dark times, the age of the vampire, the rise of you, Lord Rassilon. And they told me about the games." "Oh, the games!" Rassilon clapped his hands. "Oh, they were fun!" He laughed as he thought of an ancient time. "They were an abuse of our power," retorted Barusa. "Nonsense, my lord!" laughed Rassilon. "They were a way to alleviate the boredom our lives had become. Oh, imagine, Barusa, we had created our society above all others, developed stellar engineering on a scale only dreamt of by others, split the reality of time and space, and designed craft to traverse the barriers of their realities. We had become gods!" "And then we have meddled with the affairs of others," accused Barusa. "There were failures," admitted Rassilon, as he walked away from the console and back to the tomb where the head was resting. "I admit our experiences on Minyos and Vogan did not go as we had hoped, but we were a young people. We strode out through infinity and stopped the threats of the Ragnarok and the vampire. We saved countless races from servitude. We were divine!" He knelt and stared into the eyes of the Cyberman. "Oh, but we became bored. We needed entertainment. That is why we created this technology." He gestured behind him to the equipment that sat before Barusa. "Oh, we lorded over the games as a way of alleviating our boredom. Nobody got hurt. except for the countless lesser beings that died for your pleasure. Tell me, my lord Barusa, asked Rassilon, turning and walking slowly back across the tomb. Have you ever seen a Metebelis spider eat a Tritomor? Or see a Pyrovile pull the wings off a Menoptera? No? Of course you haven't. You haven't experienced the thrill of the games before those bleeding hearts of the Panopticon deemed the games a barbaric in nature. Lady Flavia and her movement put a stop to that and brought monotony to the capital. A wicked grin crossed his face as he came to a halt before Barusa. Flavia, he mused. Whatever happened to that harpy? He looked at Barusa. I seem to recall she became your successor. He laughed as Barusa turned away. I have no knowledge of anything after my incarceration, he replied curtly. His fingers worked on the console as he tried not to remember the events leading to his imprisonment for eternity in the tomb. What happened, Barusa? Asked Rassilon suddenly. When did you stop being a good man? When did the thirst for power grip your hearts? I'm still a good man, said Barusa, without looking up from the console. It was Gallifrey who betrayed me. Nonsense! Your thirst for power led you here to my tomb. Your desire to become immortal drove you to your position now. That seed of power germinated inside both your hearts and seized every part of your body until you became insane with the need for supreme control. That's wrong, said Barusa, as his head dropped, and he closed his eyes. I had a vision for Gallifrey. I wanted to restore our species to its position of respect that we had lost. I wanted to open new networks of understanding and teach others. I wanted a new world for our people. That's a lie, countered Rassilon. You wanted Gallifrey to be a world in your image, a world under your thumb, a new power base under your control. And what of you, Lord Rassilon? Snapped Barusa, as he rose from his chair and confronted Rassilon. How did you fall so far to become this? He waved up and down the cybernetic body of the fallen president. How? Shouted Rassilon as he stood staring down Barusa. I was betrayed. I was turned upon by our own people. Everything I had done for them, and I was to be reduced to this by their hand, and by the hand of one. His cybernetic fist clenched, and anger filled his body. And I shall extract my revenge by seeing that person suffer for the indignities I have endured. I shall see him scream my name and beg for mercy before they are wiped from existence, and I shall have my vengeance! And does this person have a name? He does. Which is? Doctor. Well, there you have it, the first part of Father Time. Well, I hope you enjoyed that, and I hope you'll come back for the next part. Till then, goodbye.